welcome to another wargame review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we are taking a look at 1754 Conquest, the French Indian War from Academy Games.
And I am smarting. Badly. I got spanked.
So this is part of the Birth of America series. Other titles in this series are 1775 Rebellion, 1812.
What's the tagline on that one?
I don't remember. The War of 1812?
Don't remember. I don't remember.
Is it just those three? Is there no?
Yeah, it's just the three.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a light, introductory, dudes on a map style area control war game. So this is more akin to something like Axis and Allies or Risk, but this has a lot more history than Risk does. And it puts you in something that, for non-war gamers, you don't typically see on a game. This can play up to 4 players, where you would play as teams. So there's 2 factions basically. You have French regulars and French Canadians against British regulars and British colonials. And then what's different with this game is that there's kind of this neutral Native American First Nation faction.
Yep.
Which it's basically guys on the board in various areas, and when your guys move in, you can ally with them and they can fight for you, but as soon as you leave them alone, enemy can come in and have them fight for them. So there's this switching side there that no one can really control, which adds a lot of interesting stuff to this game. Like I said, and we'll show you later, the board's divided up into areas. Some of the areas are kind of worth victory points, and it's a case of trying to get as many of those to kind of gain more victory points. Mm-hmm. And then when the game ends, whoever controls the most of those areas wins the game. That's basically what the game is. Very easy to learn. It's actually kind of has like a card-powered system. So you have all these beautiful colored wooden cubes, which represent your various armies of the different factions and sub-factions. But each player has this very small deck. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 cards, that's standard across all the games, I think. They were all 12. And these say, I can move X amount of armies, X amount of spaces. It's a lot of what they are.
So it's moved like 1 army, 2 spaces, or 2 armies, 2 spaces.
Yeah. And an army is not just one guy like
Right.
it is in other games. An army is everyone in one area, you pick them up and you move them 1 or 2 spaces.
Including your allied
Yes.
cubes as well. So if it's the French turn and there are yellow cubes, the Canadians in with that French army, they can move together.
And if you're playing 2-player, it's easy. I pick up my guys, I move them.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start having team-based games with 4 players, well, I, as the French Canadians, might not want to get all of my guys set along with you on this suicide mission. So you get into having some,
little negotiation
on your own side.
Yeah.
What's the most optimal thing to do? So if you play with power gamers, you might run into a little bit of friction there. So just make sure you take a step back and understand that, discuss that before you play. Say, hey, don't boss me around.
Right. We've never played this 4-player.
No.
We haven't played 1812 or the others 4-player, but I would love to try it 4-player.
Did you play 7-8 with more players?
I played with 2 players, 1775. Yeah.
What about 8-7-8 Vikings?
Oh, we played with 3 of us.
But that was 2 against 1?
Yes. So it was me controlling the Vikings. The other guys controlling the Vikings, and I had the...
Did they run into any of that kind of stuff? Or
Yeah, I mean, they had a couple times where I don't want to move my pieces there, because they had something they were planning. So it definitely adds another element to the game. I would like to try this 4 players.
But as a 2-player game, this is a fine, normal 2-player war game. Have a great time with it. So the native tribe, those green cubes, I thought that was a really great addition to the game. So in 1812, the factions are divided up where the natives are a playable faction, and they play with the British and the Canadians against the American regulars and the American colonials.
So in that instance, there's 3 factions versus 2.
Yes, and that's important because to end the game and to win the game, you have to. Each faction has a truce card, and you have to play that. So in that one, you've got 3 factions. You've got to play all 3 truce cards, and then that enables me to trigger the end game when I want it to go off.
Yeah.
As opposed to the Americans in that one, you've only got 2, so a little bit more. And that's the way it is in this one. There's really 2 playable factions on each side, so it's easier to control when the game ends and if you want to be the one to end it. And I enjoyed that because it gave both sides that freedom, so to speak, to end the game when they need to, when it's most optimal. But also, you still have to wait for that card to come up in your deck of cards. Another interesting part of the game is the turn order. This is not an I go, you go style game. They do, and it's also not a random chit draw, because there's no chits in the game.
Yeah, but it's a random cube draw. Yeah, so it's the same thing basically. They just decided to do these cool cubes,
which they're basically dice with no faces.
Yep.
Each faction has one, and you stick them all in the bank.
Yep.
And so you get this random turn order every time, and that keeps you on the tip of your toes.
Yeah.
Because what happened in the game we played was Grant would have both of his factions go, being able to do some damage.
First and second.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then I would have my 2 factions go at the end.
Yeah.
And that happened twice in a row, so that helps. That gives an advantage, I think, to the person who goes last.
Well, it gives you the opportunity to decide if you can end the game by playing that truce card. You want to try to make sure and capture enough victory point spaces to then
or if they
win.
made a mistake, they left a weakness, you can pierce through with that last truce card and capitalize on a mistake.
Yeah,
you do have that option, and that's pretty much what happened in this one.
You did that down here, and you kind of did that here.
Yeah, took Fort Necessity and Fort William Henry. That swung enough victory points, and I did that with my truce card, and I already had a right end game. So that's always something that keeps the game a little bit chaotic, but it also keeps you on your toes. You always have to be wary of that kind of thing happening. So you got to try and set up in the most optimal way possible. Although in a map this big, with a frontier as wide as it is, that is very, very difficult to do.
Yeah.
So what we'll do is...
So I wanted to say one other thing. The faction cube draw is such a neat part of this game. And we enjoyed that about 1812.
Yes.
When I played 1775 many, many years ago, that was one of the first times I played that type of system. And I really think it fits this is a 17th century battle. 18th century, 17th century, geez. An 18th century battle, and command and control is difficult, communication is difficult, they don't have radios. I like that. To me, it's very chaotic and really fits the theme of the game.
What's nice with this one also is that the little turn track also indicated when the native faction would go.
Yep.
Again, they're not a playable faction, but each of the spaces on the turn track has a different symbol on it, and the symbols correspond to places on the board. And so where the green one would go, it's their turn, that signified where the native reinforcements would come out on the board. They were never static, where
it was random.
You got 2 here and 2 here. Well, this might come out, if it's turn 4, they're going to come out over here and over here. If it's turn 5, when that green one's pulled next time, they're going to come out in different spaces. So you could never rely on them to do what you wanted them to do, so to speak. So that was a really nice extra use of that turn track as well. I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, and that's also very thematic too. You really couldn't tell the natives what to do. They worked with you as long as they felt they had the advantage, and in the end, and there were cards that reflect that, they would trade sides when it made sense.
Yeah, and you control these factions by having your guys with them. They don't have a choice to say no, so to speak. Because it's presumed you're coming with money and ammunition and food and all this good supplies to kind of bribe them onto your side, so to speak. And you go in, pick some
Womp
guys
them and
up.
brandy, basically, though. That's what they did to them.
you pick them up, and then they'd be willing to fight with you, and then you move on, and then you could.
And there were some cards that event cards that reflected like a truce ending or an agreement with them ending, and they switched sides, and they you know, that's cool because that's what happened as well.
Yeah, and that's the nice part is you've got all these. Most of these cards are like it's a move card, but there's like 2 or 3 events in each deck, and they just give you an extra little edge to do something out of the ordinary. But some of those things can have pretty serious implications, which is always fun. Where those adds they do add something to the game. So I think what we'll do is we'll show you the board a little bit, and then wrap up with a few final thoughts. So here's a look at the map. As you see, beautiful colored map. Always a big fan of Academy Games' maps in these series. Great, historical feel to it with the way that the borders and the colors are done, with the little details of the hills and the rivers, things like that. And they have the old, kind of the old names. So you've got Six Nations down here, Mohicans, Abenaki, things like that. So you get a lot of feel just from the board itself. As you can see, dudes on the map, you get lots of wooden and cubes going on. Each faction represented by a color. So you've got the yellow are the French Canadians, the purple are the French regulars, then you've got British colonials, which are the white cubes, and British regulars, which are the red ones. And then you've got these green cubes, they're the native faction, which are kind of dotted all over the board. And those are ones which you kind of move in, take advantage, they kind of join your side, and they fight alongside with you. Something that's interesting is, so right here, there's only French units, so they're going to control these green ones. When you have factions of both sides, things start to get a bit muddy and murky in the water there. Basically, the game's played with these deck of cards we were talking about. You have 12, you basically have a hand of 3 of them, and typically speaking, a lot of them are these movement cards, and it says 2 armies, 2 spaces, or 3 armies, 2 spaces, 3 armies, 1 space. Something like that. So you basically pick 3 armies, move them 2 spaces, and this is a white one. And basically, any time, any space where you have a white cube, you can move it. So you have this huge army here. You not only get to move all the white ones, but all of the allied ones with it, if the red player agrees, which in this instance, if you're playing a 2-player, white and red are on the same team by the same player, you move them all. Then we're just going to move 1 space here. I can move a couple others, so we've got some white guys up here. They're going to come up here and reinforce this army, and then we've got this big old bunch of white guys here, and they're going to move up. Let's see. They're going to kind of move a couple of spaces here, and as soon as they move in here, these green cubes, they kind of join forces with them and now allied with myself, so that's quite nice there. That's it. That's movement. Then you resolve this combat. Defender fires first in a combat, and you basically roll dice which are colored based on who's rolling. So the purple only have 2 purple dice. That's the maximum they can roll. Doesn't matter how many purple cubes, we're going to roll 2, unless we're in a space where we've got less than 2 purple. So this one, he's only going to roll 1 purple one here, for example. So they roll 2 defensive dice. Oh, fantastic. I rolled 2 hits. That's kind of what I did all day. We're going to lose a couple guys. Those guys are dead. Then the attacker gets to shoot. Now the attacker's in an interesting spot here, because we've got good unit composition. So they're going to roll max white dice and max red dice. So now I'm going to chuck 5 dice as the attacker. And I do 3 hits, so we're going to kill 3 purple guys. There you go. And then we do have these flee symbols. So 2 of these white ones, these are British colonials. They're like, oh, the fighting was too intense. So they run over to this kind of fled box, and they'll come back later on. If ever you roll blanks, these are command decisions. You can optionally say, I'm going to move these guys back. They're going to retreat. And that becomes very important if you're ever in a really bad spot. This is the only way to retreat. And it's also, it kind of helps you to say, I'm going to crush these guys. I want to move a couple guys back so I'm not totally exposed in the rear. So you get some very interesting tactical choices from the dice. And the dice have some different symbols here. So these are British regulars. They have 3 attack hit symbols and 3 command decisions. They will never flee from battle, whereas these colonials have 1 hit, 2 hit, 1 flee, 2 flee, 1 command, 2 command. And that's different again from, for example, the natives. They have 1, 2 hits, 1 flee, and 3 command decisions. It's kind of their territory. They might know better what to do. So, but that's it. That's it. You fight to the death, or until everyone's moved out. They might roll some more retreats. Boop, I take this over. This space is worthless in the sense that it doesn't have one of these stars on it. These stars are kind of the victory ones. That's why there's a little control marker here. And basically you fight and fight and fight until the game ends. And the game ends, like we said, with those truce cards. Let's find one. And the truce card, it's just like a normal movement card. So you play it for the moves, but it says truce on it. And then this kind of goes in a little display up here. And once one side, or both sides, have played both of their truce cards, so if the Colonials place one, and then later on the British Regulars place one, the game's going to end at the end of this round, as long as it's round 3 or more. Obviously you can't end the game in turns 1 or 2, that would just be silly, just blitzkrieg and everything be over. But that's how the game plays. You've got a hand of 3 cards, so you're kind of cycling through these, hoping to pull that truce card so that you can kind of hold on to it, or not be forced to use it. That's also something you might get into. And then you've got a couple of cool events to kind of accentuate and help you out doing what you're trying to do. So you can get some reinforcement markers, you can manipulate native markers a bit more. But honestly, that's what the game is. It's very, very easy to play. These fled ones, they're going to come back out again when you draw the initiative markers, which are just cubes. They go on this turn. So you have green, and then whatever you pull out of the cup is going to be next. So it might be red. Red's going to go, and then you might pull white. White's going to go, but that's going to be random and different every turn. And that kind of dictates when these fled units come back in. That's kind of like they fled from battle, but they come back again. And you also get normal reinforcements as well. And those are just placed on these very, very, very important little reinforcement points if they're colonials. But if they're regulars, they come in on ships from Europe. So they're going to come in these harbors. French ones over here and here typically. So you get a lot of contested areas in the harbors. That's something that I felt was quite unique in this game compared to other ones in this series. The fighting over the ports and the port movement felt a bit more prevalent to me. Something I did want to talk about that's very, very cool is the fort dice. So anywhere where you have a fort marker, not an icon, a marker, if you're defending there, you get to roll this as well as your defense dice. And if you roll the fort symbol, it negates an enemy hit. So that's really nice for, keeping your strength up. Because if they roll poorly, oh look, you negate that one hit, they're going to have a flee and 2 command decisions, and they don't do anything to you. So you get to go roll at full strength again next turn, and hopefully you don't do that. But this just adds an extra little layer, and this is a fascinating result, because if you ever have to retreat out of an area, so let's say this is what I was defending with, as the French, and say the British are marching into this area. What would happen here, if I had this result as a defender, if my last units are ones that I do a command decision to leave this area, they can basically destroy the fort on the way out. Boom, so that they can't use it. It's destroyed forever, so I wouldn't get to reuse it if I recaptured it. But that gives you some very interesting options there. Now, if I had rolled kind of normal hits, and then I'd done combat and I was killed, I don't have the option to remove that. So you have to do that retreat action to kind of get yourself out of there. And that added some really cool nuance to, should I leave this area? Should I not? Do I destroy the fort? Am I going to take it back? So I really enjoyed that little aspect. But a lot of that's what the game is, really. It's moving around, fighting, trying to capture these areas, and then going from there and trying to end the game when it's most opportune for you. So what we'll do is we'll wrap up with some final thoughts. So that was a look at the board. Again, not an overly complex game. A lot of dice rolling, so understand that, this isn't necessarily
There's some luck of the dice.
The most heavily tactical game because you chuck a lot of dice. and they can swing. You had
Yep.
terrible dice rolls today,
Yep.
which is normally my thing.
Right, it normally is your thing.
And I had very good
Now I know
dice
how you
rolls.
feel.
Oh man,
Yeah.
it's just depressing.
And what we're talking about with the dice rolls, the way the dice work, there are different grades. Your regulars have 3 hits and 3 what's called tactical or command decisions, where you can literally retreat strategically to a friendly area. As a militia, they have 2 hits, 2 flees, and 2 of those command decisions. And then the native dice actually have 2 hits, 1 flee, and 3 command decisions. So what ended up happening a lot tonight was I was rolling my colonial militia, and I was rolling fleas every time. So it's like they're running away, which they go into this holding box, which is a good thing. It's better than them being killed.
They come back in force, but
It's like every time they were just fleeing.
Yeah.
Not hitting. I don't think I hit more than once or twice in any single roll, and I think I saw you hit 4 and 5 times several rolls. So that it's very swingy. You've got to understand that. You've got to calculate the odds. The other cool thing about this game is it's about managing the differentiation of your forces. You want to have as many dice as you can,
Yep.
which to have 3 of the native dice, I think there are 3 of them, right?
Just 2.
Just 2. You have to have at least 2 natives in that space. If you have 3, you only get 2 dice, so you can lose a native and still roll your maximum dice. So it's a matter of creating an army that is powerful, having several regulars, several militia, and then understanding the militia don't hit very well, but they're there to kind of act as
But
fodder.
you can get quite a lot of them,
Yeah.
and so you use them as cannon
So
fodder, so to speak.
that composition of your armies is very, very key.
But it's a double-edged sword, right? If you concentrate too much on making an optimal army, you spend your whole turn doing that, and then
Yeah.
you don't actually do anything. So you're trying to take advantage of situations where you can. Oh, I can pick up some natives. Great,
Right.
let's move on. But otherwise, some of your forces are very spread out, and trying to bring them together can be difficult. So you can end up. It's very tempting to do what we did, where you have these huge armies where you're just like,
Yeah.
oh. But it's almost sometimes more optimal to use lots of border skirmishes with smaller armies, just to like move guys in as distractions, bits
Yeah.
and pieces to capture things that are vacant. So, but that's a lot of where the game comes in. You have a lot of choices. The board has so much openness. Some of it's totally worthless.
Yeah, some of these spaces we
other than
never
avenues to get other places,
we never went to.
but that's what it's there for.
Yeah. The other thing that's interesting about the board is the regulars, the French regulars, only have the 2 spots
Yeah.
to muster at, whereas the British have 5 or 6 different ports. The problem with the ports down here, though, is they're really far away from the action. And that was something you and I talked about while we were playing the game. This is very different than 1812. 1812, I felt we were able to hurry our forces from the southern or northern boundaries into the conflagration. Here, man, these guys never moved.
Yeah, that
It
was
just never worked out.
And where these guys would come into play is if I had made serious forays
Right.
into America, then because then
They would have
really
been in
close,
reserve
then they
and-
would have
yeah.
done that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's kind of part of the reason I didn't do it.
But this board is very interesting with the harbors where you can muster, the distances and the openness, and then the Native American recruiting symbols. Very, very interesting setup that I look forward to playing again so that I can get a better feel for it.
And one of my favorite things about this game, same in 1812, it is impossible to turtle.
No.
Because that's something that I find myself doing in games. I'm like, I gotta build up,
Right.
build up, and then we can like move out and crush people.
You just gotta go for
cannot
it.
do that.
Yep.
It's not physically possible. The board doesn't let you do that. Combat system doesn't let you do that. So you have to keep going. It's a swirling mess of combats,
Yeah.
and you're just trying to capitalize where you can. And I think that's what makes this a really fun game. It does actually have a lot of depth, especially for what it is.
Right.
Like, if you're the kind of people that just play with some risk, play some Axis and Allies, this is a game that goes in line with that, but actually does a lot more.
Oh, yeah,
Plus, you get
yeah.
a great history lesson out of it as well.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what Uwe over at Academy Games was going for.
That's what they try to do. So yeah, this is an intro level game, but it's an introductory game only in its simplicity of mechanics. I feel like there's enough here that you've got to pay attention to a lot of different aspects to keep this game moving forward and to be good at this game.
And it's a quick game as well.
Yeah, we played in about an hour and 15 minutes. And we ended in turn 6 out of 8.
Yeah, and 2 more turns. The game goes on at a really good clip.
Yep.
Not a lot of downtime because you're either attacking or being attacked.
Right.
That's also something that's really nice as well. You're not sitting there going like, when's my turn coming around?
Yeah.
You're always involved and always engaged as well.
Right. But my only other comment, I've played all 3 of these now. I know you haven't played 1775. They actually have a different feel. Yes. While the mechanics are similar, each of them has a different feel. And I think that's bravo to Academy Games. I think they've done a good job, not just creating 3 different games with 3 different time periods and having them all be the same. They feel different. Little elements here and there. This had fort markers, right?
With the fort dice.
With the fort dice, which was cool. The mustering areas, what did you call these, cities or strong points?
Yeah.
Those were different elements. And then the natives in this one were very different than 1812. And so
it's a great credit because having played the other games, I barely needed to read the rule book to know how this one played.
We just had to find the key new stuff and understand that and make sure we were doing it right.
But for it to give me, because I honestly felt this was very different from 1812.
Agreed.
And for it to do that and be so similar in the mechanics, that's a credit. It's good. It's not just another theme pasted on.
Right.
Although it is, but it isn't. But there's enough
it's the same system. Yeah. It feels different because the board's a little different. I just think they've done a good job in making these different. Feels different.
Yeah.
And I know you made the comment you liked this one better than 1812.
I felt like I couldn't really tell you why.
It.
I thought the native faction was really cool.
Really liked that element.
And I felt like there was a bit more focus to what I was trying to do.
Right.
I felt like in 1812 it was just like border skirmishes galore, and we were just going back and forth over the same few spots.
Well, I wonder
again and again.
In 1812, if you remember, they have the water movement cards.
Yeah.
And here we don't have that. Now I know you can move from port to port,
but only the regulars.
Right. So I don't know. That's an interesting. I'm wondering if that was what made that be so chaotic.
And nowhere was safe because
nowhere was safe because you just had to move across the lakes and hit you up. So that was different, very different.
But yeah, I had a blast playing this. Great introductory game. The Birth of America series, I'd recommend it to basically anyone who can deal with conflict in their games. If you're the kind of people that like it's co-op only, obviously don't play this.
Yeah.
But, if you played any kind of conflict games, dudes on the map, area control, with some dice chucking for combat, this is a great game to check out. This whole series is great, and the production value is off the charts.
And they're beautiful. This is a beautiful board. Not only graphically, but the pieces and the colors. It just creates a very, very aesthetically appealing and interesting experience.
So I appreciate you guys tuning in. This has been 1750 for Conquest from Academy Games, and we've been theplayersaid.com.